Welcome, guests. Before entering the museum, please note that all exhibits contained within these halls are inspired by real-life lessons, lived experiences, observed behaviors, and expensive tuition paid to the University of Life. While names, appearances, and identifying details have been altered to protect the guilty, the lessons remain remarkably authentic. The stories presented throughout this experience are intended for education, reflection, healing, laughter, and the occasional uncomfortable moment of self-awareness. If you recognize yourself in an exhibit, please remain calm. The museum is not responsible for bruised egos, sudden revelations, flashbacks to questionable decisions, or spontaneous text messages beginning with, "You know what? I owe you an apology." Proceed with curiosity. Proceed with wisdom. And above all, proceed at your own risk.
You already know who it is, so there's no need for an introduction. I'll be guiding you through an archival collection any other. Behind these walls live stories of love, friendship, family, heartbreak, growth, poor motherfucking decisions. Apologies, Gia asked me not to cuss too much on this tour. Second chances, missed warnings, and lessons that cost entirely too damn much to learn. See, I caught myself that time. Some exhibits may make you laugh. Some may make you cringe. Some may remind you of someone you used to know. And a few may remind you of yourself. As we make our way through the museum, you'll discover a carefully curated collection of characters, cautionary tales, relationship artifacts, and life lessons gathered over more than 4 decades of living, loving, trusting, hoping, and occasionally ignoring every warning sign imaginable. Please keep your hands, hearts, and unresolved situations inside the tour at all times. The exits are clearly marked, here and here. The lessons are permanent, and the growth is non-refundable. Now then, let's get started. The doors are open, and the exhibits are waiting, and our first stop today is the West Wing. Welcome to the West Wing. This section of the museum contains some of the earliest and most expensive lessons in the collection. Within these halls, you'll encounter a variety of memorable personalities, questionable decision-makers, unfinished situations, and enough warning signs to supply a small country. Among today's featured exhibits are Jailhouse Jesus, Musty Moses, Captain Recycle, Mr. Trauma Bond 007, and several others whose names have been changed to protect the guilty, but whose lessons remain remarkably intact. Please remain with your tour group at all times, because some exhibits are known to trigger flashbacks, unanswered questions, and sudden realizations. Proceed with caution. We are not responsible for spontaneous texts and sleepless nights. Stalking. I mean researching your past for answers.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson, and thank you for making it through that introduction without too much cussing. I know that required tremendous restraint on your part. Now, let me tell you about a boy named Jamal, because before there was Jailhouse Jesus, there was just Jamal, and that's what made this lesson so expensive. See, Jamal was my second boyfriend, but I considered him my first love. Now, y'all know those are not always the same thing. Sometimes your first boyfriend is just somebody you dated, and your first love is somebody who changes how you think love is supposed to feel, or at least look like. That was Jamal. Jamal was smart, funny, talented beyond belief. That boy could draw anything. You name it, he could put it on paper or a t-shirt or jeans so realistically you would swear it was walking off the page or your clothes. He wrote poetry, he wrote stories, he had a vivid and wonderful imagination. Most of all, he had heart. He had enough potential for 3 people. He was also one of the few people who truly paid attention to me. Not just listened, not just heard, but paid attention. If I mentioned something once, he remembered it. If I was having a bad day, he noticed it. If he wanted to see me, hell, he'd walk halfway across Philadelphia for just an excuse to see me for maybe 20 minutes. Sometimes he'd make up excuses to return something I, quote unquote, forgot. Many times it wasn't even important. He just wanted to see me. Looking back now, Those were probably some of the purest acts of love I've ever experienced. Not expensive, not flashy, just intentional, just for me. And at 17 years old, intentional felt like magic. My parents loved him. My mother treated him kindly. My father respected him. When he came around, he wasn't treated as a visitor. He was treated like family. For example, one day we took him shopping. That was not the intention, but that's how it happened. It was getting cold outside, and I remember him telling me, on the side while we were walking around the mall that he didn't feel well. And I was saying, well, where's your coat? Didn't you have a coat that you were supposed to have? Long story short, apparently the coat got stolen or someone took it. So, like I said, it was cold outside and he wasn't feeling well, so my mother bought him a black sweater from Macy's. Now, for some people, that's just a sweater. For him, it wasn't. You would have thought she handed him a winning lottery ticket. Years later, he still talked about that sweater. Not because of the price, not because of where it was purchased, but because of the kindness attached to it. The sweater represented something. It represented being seen, being cared for, being valued. And for a little while, life felt good. Jamal was talking about going to school because he knew I was trying to go to college. I encouraged him and say, hey, what about graphic design, art? Building something with all that talent. We were actually planning to look at schools together. Scholarships, programs, opportunities. The future was starting to take shape. Then his mother came back into the picture. Now understand, for years he talked about missing his mother, wondering where she was, hoping she was okay, wanting, that type of relationship. And when she came back, I understood why he wanted to go or felt that he should go. I was 17. I wasn't in a place to tell somebody not to reconnect with their parent. But looking back now, that move changed everything. At the time, I thought distance was the problem. Turns out distance wasn't the problem. Environment was. Because once he moved, something started changing. He always promised to write me, so the letters still came. The poems still came. The pictures that he would draw still came. Every week there'd be something waiting for me in the mailbox, and I loved it. Not because it was him. I also just loved getting mail. Mail made you feel, grown. It made you feel important. It made you feel like the world knew where to find you. But after a while, I noticed something. The return addresses kept changing. Different cities, different locations. Now, all of a sudden, different facilities. And eventually, I realized what was happening. Jamal had developed a pattern. Every time life got hard, every time the wrong people showed up, every time there was an opportunity to choose differently, he somehow found a way to choose the harder road. And then came the promises. Oh, I'm different now. That was just a temporary move with her. God's working on me. I found Jesus. This time is going to be different. I think I'm going to be doing much better now that we've moved here. And for a while, I believed him. Because I wanted to. Because the boy making those promises was still the same boy who walked across Philadelphia just to spend 20 extra minutes with me. That was the same boy that drew me pictures. This was the same boy with all that potential that was getting ready to go to school just a week before his mom arrived. It was the same boy who wore that black sweater like an armor. But every few months, another letter would arrive, another city, another facility, another promise. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, North Carolina, Florida. At this point, I think he was personally testing correctional facilities up and down the East Coast. I mean, if prisons had frequent flyer miles, this man would qualify for platinum status. And every stop came with the same sermon. God found me. God changed me. God is working on me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Everything happens for a reason. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe that God can change a person's life. He has changed mine. But eventually, I also learned something important. God can open a door, but you still have to walk through it. He can show you a better path, but then you still have to take it, because faith without changed behavior is just a motivational speech. And no amount of prayer can compete with a person determined to repeat the same mistakes over and over. The hardest lesson wasn't learning that he kept going back. The hardest lesson was realizing I couldn't love him out of it, or encourage him out of it, or even pray him out of it. I couldn't save him from choices he kept voluntarily making. And at some point, I realized I wasn't waiting on him anymore. I was waiting on a version of him that only existed in those letters and before he left that week. A version that kept showing up on paper but never seemed to arrive in real life. And that's when I understood the true lesson of Jailhouse Jesus. Love is powerful, but environment is powerful too. And if somebody keeps returning to the same people, the same habits, and the same mistakes, eventually potential becomes a memory. Not because they weren't capable of more, but because they never stayed free long enough to become it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how Jamal here became Jailhouse Jesus. Not heartless, not hopeless, not even evil. Just a good man who kept making bad decisions in an environment that was not built for him. And eventually I learned that loving someone and saving someone are not the same thing. Sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is accept that God may have a plan for them, but you are not supposed to be part of it.
Well, damn. I was rooting for that boy. Every time Miss Gia said he was getting his life together, I found myself believing it too. Then he'd take a hard left turn straight back into bad decisions. Now our next exhibit proves that poor choices don't always land you in jail. Sometimes they just land you in the laundry room. Ladies and gentlemen, please prepare yourselves for Musty Moses. And if you're sitting next to somebody right now, this might be a good time to politely check the ventilation.
Whew, what is that smell? The waters were parted, the soap was not. Now, before y'all start laughing, let me tell you about Mason. Because before he became Musty Moses, he was just Mason. And honestly, Mason had a lot going for him. Most of all the guys that I did talk to had a lot going for him. Mason, in this case, Mason was tall, good looking, smart, funny, easy to talk to, the kind of person that could make any entire room laugh without even trying. We had good conversations, good chemistry, good times. And for a little while, I thought this one might actually go somewhere. At least he wasn't in jail, right? Not unlike some of the other exhibits in this museum, Mason wasn't out here breaking laws. He wasn't lying. He wasn't cheating. He wasn't running around causing chaos. No. Mason's greatest enemy was Mason. And unfortunately, Mason was winning. See, when you first meet somebody, they don't hand you a brochure explaining all their habits. Nobody walks up and says, "Hey, my name is Mason and I wash these jeans quarterly." No. You discover things over time. Little clues, little observations, little mysteries. For example, I noticed a stain on a pair of jeans. No big deal. Everybody gets stains. Then 3 weeks later, same jeans, same stain, same location. Now, hold on. Maybe I'm tripping. Maybe I'm imagining things. Then a month later, same jeans, same stain, same spot. Sir, at this point, we are conducting forensic research. Because either that stain is immortal, or these pants have not seen inside of a wash machine since Clinton administration. Now, here's what made it frustrating. Mason wanted to be a doctor. A doctor. A whole doctor. Out here with the people. And he wasn't sure if he wanted to be a pediatrician or a heart surgeon. Either way, he was going to get his heart broken because, kids don't bite their tongue. And if you stink, they would have told you. But anyway, I digress. But he knew he wanted to work in medicine. And every time he talked about it, I'd be sitting there thinking, "Baby, you planning on touching patients? Because self-care and healthcare should be at least cousins." I'm just saying. Now, don't get me wrong. Mason liked nice things. Matter of fact, that man owned enough cologne to open a department store kiosk. Every scent imaginable, designer brands, fancy bottles, limited editions. You could have shopped in his bathroom. The problem was cologne is not a substitute for soap. You cannot Febreze your way into personal growth. You have to participate. And no matter how expensive the cologne was, eventually I realized something. Some levels of mustiness require direct intervention. Now, I tried to be helpful. I really did. Suggested products, suggested routines, suggested deodorants, because whatever he was using clearly wasn't winning this war. At one point, I wanted to hand that man a care package and a PowerPoint presentation. Not because I was being mean, because I was rooting for him. That's the part people don't understand. Nobody wants to invest this much energy into somebody they don't care about. I wanted him to win. I wanted him to become the doctor. I wanted him to become the version of himself he kept talking about. But eventually, I learned something. You cannot care for people more than they care for themselves. And that's when the relationship started falling apart. Not because of one big event, not because of one huge betrayal, because of accumulation. One excuse, then another excuse, then another. One neglected detail, then another neglected detail, then another. Until one day I realized I wasn't frustrated about hygiene anymore. I was frustrated about effort. Because self-care isn't really about smelling good. It's about self-respect. It's about keeping promises to yourself. It's about showing up for yourself even when nobody is watching. And if someone consistently refuses to do that, eventually it starts showing up everywhere else too. The hardest lesson Mason taught me was this. You can have good intentions. You can have talent. You can have dreams. You can have potential. But potential without maintenance eventually falls apart. Because no matter how beautiful the house is, if nobody takes care of it, eventually the roof starts leaking. Now, hopefully Mason became the doctor he always talked about becoming. I genuinely hope he did. And I hope somewhere along the way he discovered fabric softener. But whether he did or not, the lesson remains the same. You are your first responsibility. You are your first investment. You are, in fact, your first cheerleader. And if you won't consistently show up for yourself, why should anyone else believe you will show up for them? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how Mason became Musty Moses.
Well, damn. I spent that entire exhibit hoping somebody would hand that boy a washcloth and a life coach, because the tragedy wasn't the smell. The tragedy was the wasted potential. Now, unfortunately, our next exhibit has a completely different problem. Captain Recycle had excellent hygiene, excellent confidence, excellent communication skills. The only thing he lacked was honesty. And as you're about to discover, that becomes a problem real damn quick. Let's continue.
It's a bird. It's a plane. Oh, no, hell. It's Captain Recycle. Now, before he became Captain Recycle, he was just Eddie. And ladies, before you judge me, let me remind you of something. Every woman has a list. Don't sit up there acting brand new. Everybody got somebody they lose all common sense for. Some of y'all got Idris Elba. Some of y'all got Aaron Pierre. Some of y'all got that one man from that one movie whose name you conveniently remember every time he take his shirt off. My weakness, at least at the time, an accent. Now, Eddie wasn't the finest man I've ever seen. But baby, that accent was doing some heavy lifting. The kind of accent that can make you listen to complete nonsense for an extra 15 minutes. And unfortunately for me, Eddie knew it. That man walked around with the confidence of somebody who had never once been told no and believed every lie he ever been told. Not because he was evil, because he genuinely thought he could talk his way out of anything. Matter of fact, Eddie was one of them dudes that had just enough charm to get himself into trouble and just enough confidence to think that he could talk his way back out of it. And for a while, I think he did. See, Eddie wasn't the type to tell one big lie. No. Eddie preferred, I would say, a collection of lies. A carefully curated assortment of half-truths, omissions, convenient memory loss, and selective storytelling. The truth wasn't something he told. The truth was something he kind of redacted. Like our current government. Anyway, stay focused. And apparently one of his favorite edits was forgetting that he had a girlfriend and newborn twins living in another state. Now, I don't know if Eddie believed in out of sight, out of mind, or if he genuinely thought state lines erased responsibilities. But somewhere in his mind, New York seemed to exist in a completely different universe. A universe where girlfriends didn't count, baby mamas didn't count, and apparently newborn twins that were apparently sick somehow became optional information. Sir, those are not fun facts. Those are major plot points. And unfortunately for Eddie, reality was about auditing. Now, Valentine's Day had rolled around, and Eddie had showed up with some gifts. Now, before we get to the gifts, I need to explain something. Because otherwise, y'all gonna judge me and think I was overly impressed by a teddy bear in a jacket. And I truly wasn't. At least not for the reasons you all may think. See, Valentine's Day and I had a complicated relationship, even back in high school. I wasn't the girl getting showered with gifts and roses and cards. As a matter of fact, I was usually the person helping organize everybody else's Valentine's Day. I helped coordinate the roses, I helped coordinate the deliveries, I helped to make sure everybody got what they were supposed to get. Meanwhile, I wasn't expecting much from myself. Now, to be fair, I went to a Christian school. Now, technically that doesn't really mean much, but at least there were two really sweet boys who made sure every girl got at least one rose so nobody felt left out. And I always thought that was very kind. But there's a difference between everybody getting a rose and feeling chosen. And if I'm being honest, I wasn't exactly winning in the Valentine's Day department. Matter of fact, one year I spent all this time putting together a thoughtful gift for somebody I was dating. Custom sweatshirt, his favorite football team, special details, the works. And in return, baby, the imbalance was imbalancing. Let's just say that after that experience, my expectations were lower than a limbo stick. So by the time Eddie showed up with an actual Valentine's Day gift bag, not a grocery bag, not a convenience store bag, you know the bags that'll be black that you get from the corner store, so you can't really see what you bought, but they real thin, not those. An actual Valentine's Day bag with a teddy bear, a chain, and get this, actual clothing. A Celtics jacket, green and white. I was genuinely surprised. Because for once, it felt like somebody had actually thought about me. Now, little did I know, somebody had. It just wasn't me. And that's where the trouble started. Because, see, when you're operating with information available to you, all of what I've named sounds sweet. It looks innocent. What I didn't know was that I wasn't receiving gifts. I was, in fact, receiving recycled inventory. I wasn't his Valentine. I was an overstocked merchandise. Now, a few days later, I got a phone call on my phone. And trust me, it's exactly what you're thinking. But it didn't go the way most stories go. The woman on the other end wasn't screaming. She wasn't cussing. She wasn't threatening me. Matter of fact, she sounded calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that means somebody already knows all the answers. They're just gathering evidence. The kind of calm that makes you realize you're not talking to a woman. You're talking to a Detective Benson. And apparently, Detective Benson had phone records. Now, she started asking me questions. Not weird questions. Very specific questions. Dangerously specific. She says, hey, I know you don't know me, and I know the questions I want to ask you are going to sound strange, but you do know an Eddie, right? Yeah. Okay, good. By chance, did Eddie happen to give you a green Celtics jacket? Yeah. As a matter of fact, that was my Valentine's Day gift he gave me. Detective Benson says. Now, that's not a random question. That's a question with paperwork attached to it. And like I said yes. And she got quiet. Then she laughed. Not a happy laugh. A detective laugh. The kind of laugh people do when they finally solve a mystery. Then she said, well, at least I know where the jacket went. And baby, the museum opened. Turns out the jacket was originally supposed to be for her. But she didn't like Celtics, told him to go exchange it. And instead of exchanging it, Captain Recycle activated. Reduce, reuse, regift, apparently. Mission accomplished. Now, while we're talking, she starts telling me the rest of the story. Apparently, she had recently given birth to twins. Twins. Plural. Twins. And one of the babies was still in the hospital dealing with medical complications. Meanwhile, this man was up here in Philadelphia acting like fatherhood was an optional side quest. Sir, you have unfinished business and you've been up here lying. Okay, never mind. Let's stay focused. Now, at this point, I'm already shocked. Because I didn't know about a girlfriend. I didn't know about a baby mama. And I definitely, for damn sure, didn't know about no twins. But she wasn't finished. Because she explained that Eddie had been telling her I was constantly calling him, harassing him, bothering him, refusing to leave him alone. Like, girl, I just couldn't get enough of this man. Or at least that's what he was telling her. Now, mind you, I didn't even know this woman existed. But according to Eddie, I was apparently conducting a full-time harassment campaign. Now, here's where the story gets good. Because unlike Eddie, this woman believed in math. She believed in facts. And most importantly, she believed in Verizon phone records. So she starts counting. And counting. And counting. Then she notices something. 27 outgoing calls. 27. Not 2, not 5, not 10. 27 outgoing calls. And every single one of them belonged to Eddie. Meanwhile, I had exactly one call on the record. One. Uno. A singular phone call. Which she even noted had to be a callback based on the time that the call came in. The kind of phone call that probably happened because he called me, and as she said, I called right back. That's it. Now, she didn't yell. She didn't argue. She simply decided to gather witnesses. Then she put us on a 3-way call. And child, when I tell you that man lied like he was testifying before Congress, good Lord, that man was lying with confidence. Olympic level confidence. She asked, so she's been bothering you? Yep. So you keep calling her to tell her to leave you alone? Yep. So you don't want nothing to do with her? Nope. Then she hit him with the receipts. 27 outgoing call receipts. 1 incoming call. At this point, even the calculator was exhausted. Then she says, well, I think I got one last witness. And suddenly I appeared on the line. Hello? Baby? You could feel that man's soul leave his body through the phone. His spirit hit the ejection button. If embarrassment had a sound effect, that would have been it. Now, after all of this, after getting caught, after getting exposed, after getting fact-checked by phone records, common sense, and 2 grown women, you would think the story ends here. Nope. Because approximately 45 minutes later, my phone rings. Again. And guess who it is? Captain Recycle himself, talking about, don't worry about nothing I said on the phone. Sir! What? I didn't really mean all of that. Sir! What? I still want to talk to you? Sir, if you don't get the hell up off my phone. This man had just been convicted in court of Verizon records. The evidence had been presented, and the jury had a verdict. Sentencing had already begun, and somehow he still believed he could appeal the decision? At that point, I realized Eddie's real problem. He wasn't just lying to other people, he was lying to himself. Because anybody with common sense would have gone into witness protection after that conversation. But not Eddie. He still thought the accent could save him. And that's when I learned the lesson of Captain Recycle. People who recycle gifts eventually recycle excuses. And people who recycle excuses eventually recycle relationships. And of course, people who recycle relationships eventually start treating human beings like inventory. Something to pick up, something to put down, something to store away, reuse later. But people aren't jackets. People aren't teddy bears. People are not backup plans. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how Eddie became Captain Recycle. Not because of a recycled Celtics jacket, not because of a teddy bear, not because of a chain, but because he recycled the same selfish behavior over and over and expected everybody else to keep accepting it as well. And eventually, nobody did.
This motherfucker here. Sorry, Miss Gia, but it was definitely warranted. Well, that was a lot. Now I have heard of recycling paper. I've heard of recycling plastic. Hell, I've even heard of recycling old furniture. But recycling Valentine's Day gifts, girlfriends, excuses, and entire realities? That's a new one for me. And let's be clear. The most impressive thing about Captain Recycle wasn't the lying. It was the confidence. That man got caught with evidence, witnesses, phone records, a girlfriend, 2 babies, and a teddy bear, and still thought he could negotiate his way out of it. That's not confidence. That's a medical condition. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're approaching our final exhibit of the day. And based on the notes I've been given, this next one is less of an exhibit and more of an ongoing investigation. Apparently, we're going to be revisiting this individual several times throughout the museum, which is never a sentence that brings me comfort. So before we take our intermission, let's meet Trauma Bond 007.
Trauma Bond 007. Licensed to spill, not licensed to heal, though. Now, before he became Trauma Bond 007, before he became Captain Saberho, before he became DJ Crash Out, and long before he became Mr. Lost and Confused, before he became all those other exhibits you all will eventually meet, there was Tyler. And if I'm being honest, I wasn't looking for Tyler. Matter of fact, I was actively avoiding Tyler. Because at that point in my life, I was recovering from heartbreak. You know that stage where every man is annoying, every man is suspicious, every man suddenly represents a bad decision. That was me. I wasn't looking for love. I wasn't looking for a relationship. I wasn't looking for a future. I was looking for peace. Then one afternoon, I saw him. Tall, light-skinned, walking down the street carrying a blue bag with a white stripe. Plaid shirt, jeans, boots. The whole thing looked like a movie scene. And I remember thinking, damn, he fine. And then I kept driving because I wasn't interested. That's at least what I told myself. Then my car cut off. Now, to this day, I still don't know why. Nothing was wrong with the car. It had never done that before. But right then, it cut off. And apparently, Tyler interpreted that as divine intervention. Because the moment the car stopped, he turned around from walking and came back. Now, normally, I'd keep it moving. But I wasn't about to be rude after this man walked all the way back. Besides, sometimes you got to make sure people look the same up close as they do from a distance. Because everybody knows about a Monet painting. Beautiful from across the room. Then you get close and suddenly you're looking at random brushstrokes wondering, what the hell is this that I'm looking at? Well, unfortunately for me, Tyler looked even better close up. The smile, the voice, the energy, everything matched. And after a few minutes of talking, he reached into his bag and handed me a CD. 1980s Greatest Hits. Now, I tried to give it back. I really did. But he insisted. Because I seemed nice and it was a real CD and he wanted to give a pretty lady something nice to listen to while they rode around town. Or at least he says. Then we exchanged numbers, and within 5 minutes, this man was already calling me. And that's how it started. Not with romance, not with grand gestures, not with a relationship, with conversation. Lots of conversation. Endless conversation. I believe dangerous amounts of conversation. The kind of conversation where you look up and realize it's 3 o'clock in the morning and somehow you've discussed childhood memories, dreams, fears, fast foods, favorite foods, music, disappointments, life goals, and absolutely nothing useful at the same time. And before I knew it, the conversations became routine. Then one day I got sick, really sick. The kind of sick where your throat swells up so badly you can't even swallow. The kind of sick that lands you in the emergency room. He happened to call, and I mumbled enough to tell him what was going on. I really couldn't even talk right. Just enough to say, I'm in the emergency room. That was it. A little while later, my phone rang. And this fool says, which side of the hospital are you on? Now remember, we barely knew each other. And somehow this man had ridden his bike all the way to the emergency room just to make sure I was okay and had someone to sit with. This was the first time my father met him. And years later, I still remember what my father said. He really likes you. He's into you. Now, my father didn't comment on anybody. He wasn't handing out relationship evaluations. So when he noticed it, I paid attention because there was something genuine there, something caring, something real. And maybe that's why I stayed. Maybe that's why I kept answering the phone. Maybe that's why I ignored the little things, the things that didn't quite make sense, the contradictions, the moods, the moments where it felt like I was talking to 3 different people sharing one body. At that time, I didn't have language for it. I'm still young. I just knew something felt complicated. But complicated isn't always obvious when you're standing inside of it. Sometimes complicated looks like chemistry. Sometimes it looks like a connection. It looks like understanding. And sometimes it looks like somebody finally seeing you when you needed to be seen. What I didn't know then was that this wasn't the end of the story. This was just the beginning. Oh, the very, very beginning. Because Tyler wasn't just one exhibit. He's a whole wing in itself. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to need more than one museum stop to unpack all of this.
Now hold on a minute. That's it?
What do you mean that's it?
That's all you're going to tell us? Because right now, all I got is a handsome man, a 1980s CD, a bicycle ride, and a hospital visit. I'm supposed to know what makes him Trauma Bond 007 from that?
No, you're not supposed to know yet.
Good. Because I was starting to think I missed an entire exhibit.
Trust me, Mr. Jackson, you didn't miss anything. We're still at the beginning. The very beginning.
See, that's what worries me. Every time somebody says we're still at the beginning, that's usually where the trouble starts.
And that's exactly why we're stopping here. Because some stories need room to breathe. And some people, well, they need more than one exhibit.
Well, that's comforting.
In the meantime, while Mr. Jackson tries to figure out what just happened, we're going to take a short intermission and visit a special exhibit. One that's a little less personal and a whole lot more universal. Because sometimes, before you understand the people in these exhibits, you may need to understand the warning signs. So let's say hello to our special curator at the Special Flags exhibit.